God, help us to know your presence in this moment. Help us to hear your word. Help us to follow your will. Help us to love your people. Amen. So you're having a dinner party. I'm going to assume this is how you do it, now that I've known most of you for a while, right? You probably just picked 8 addresses at random from the phone book and just sent out invites, right? Step 1. Step 2 is that you make all the food and you get it all set and you put it on the table. And then step 3 is that the random strangers start arriving to your house, but because they don't know you, they bring random side different dishes and beverages. Some people bring the same thing, so you just got 2 corn casseroles. And you bring them all to your table, and before them, there is all this food now, but there are no plates, there's no silverware, there's no cups. Is this how you throw a dinner party? That wasn't rhetorical. I'm hoping that you're going to say no, right? Okay, good. Because I am going to ask some other questions, so that was an easy one. Of course not. You invite people you know, and you prepare your house and table for their arrival. And because they know you, they know what to bring, and they are prepared to arrive as well. Hey, Natalie, can I ask you a question? What do you prepare for in life? Is there anything that you do in life that you have to prepare for? School? How do you prepare for school? Wake up, that's a good first step. Okay, so you have to get up, you have to get dressed, right? You take anything with you to school? Your book bag? Yourself? Is that what you said? That's good. How about you, Keenan? Is there anything in life that you have to prepare for? Baseball. How do you prepare for baseball? Practicing. And what's a practice like? Is it easy? Sometimes. But it requires work, right? Yeah. How about you, Abby? Is there anything in life that you have to prepare for? Study? For? Okay, so you don't just go into the test without studying beforehand? Not always. You had to say that. Your mom's next to you. We prepare for things. It's part of life is preparing. Last week, we covered one of the most terrifying and inspiring scriptures in all of the Bible, I feel. And that is that the resurrected Christ meets his followers, and then he tells them to go to all people and share the good news. He tells them to go and evangelize. It's a word that scares some of us, right? Now, evangelism, that's a new concept to Jesus' immediate followers, because Judaism did not go out and search for converts. There's a story that goes that there was a man who was looking to become Jewish, and so he went and he knocked on the rabbi's door, and the rabbi answered and he asked what he wanted, and the man said, "I'd like to convert," and the rabbi said, "No, you don't," and shut the door on him. The man was a bit perplexed, but went home. He decided to do the same thing the next day. He went back, he knocked on the door, the rabbi opened the door. He said, "What do you want?" The man said, "I'd like to convert. It's a beautiful religion, I'd like to convert." And the rabbi said, "No, you don't," slammed the door on it. The man did this again and again, day after day. He kept going and knocking on the door until finally, after many attempts, the man knocked on the door, the rabbi opened the door and welcomed him in. The man asked why, the rabbi kept turning him away, and the rabbi said, "Nobody wants this burden. You have to be committed." Imagine how much smaller our churches would be if that was the attitude that we have. And yet still, many of our churches function this way, right? We wait for others to come to us. Sometimes we don't even open the door for them, right? Sometimes we don't even leave a parking spot for them, right? So it's like we're shutting that door, and we hope that they're ready to witness whatever it is we are that day, and we hope that they'll be committed enough to come back. Another thing that the reason that this is kind of foreign to Jesus' followers is because Judaism in Jesus' time and in many places today isn't just a religion. It's an identity, a culture, a people. See, we treat Christianity as just a part of who we are. We almost think of it as like something that we put on for certain moments or certain days, right? Or maybe just for an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, depending on how long I talk on a Sunday, we'll say that that's our time to be Christian. But in Jesus' day and in the scriptures we read, there were Jews and then there were others. And for many, God called the people of Israel to follow, and the others did their own thing. But Jesus changed this because he tells his followers and he tells us to go, and to go to all people. So how does this work? In the book of Acts, we see his first followers trying to live out this commission. And today we get this story about Peter, the rock upon which Jesus said he will build his church, living this commission. Now, upon a first reading, it seems that there are two main characters in Acts 10. We have Cornelius and we have Peter. Cornelius has a vision to go and seek out Peter, and Peter has this bizarre vision that repeats to get a point across. We read, he saw heaven opened and something like a large sheet came down, being lowered to the ground by its four corners. And in it were all kinds of four-footed creatures and reptiles and birds of the air. That is a strong sheet that's being lowered down here. And then he heard a voice saying, get up, Peter, kill and eat. But Peter said, by no means, Lord, for I have never eaten anything that is profane or unclean. And the voice said to him again a second time, what God has made clean, you must not call profane. This happened 3 times, and the thing was suddenly taken up to heaven. I find this interesting because God is removing a stumbling block to sharing the gospel. Because what was put in place to protect us and help us to be more wholesome and holy people, we've perverted and we used it to exclude others. Instead of eating being a practice to bring us closer to God, we've used it as a way to make a distinction and a judgment on those whom we consider below us. There are those who eat the clean animals and those who eat the unclean animals. And there should be no association. And God removes that stumbling block to this good news. Peter is becoming prepared to minister outside of Israel, to minister to all of the world. Now, Cornelius is someone who is outside of Jerusalem. He's outside of this cultural identity and faith. The author of Acts tells us he's a Roman centurion from the Italian company. He is not Jewish, and definitely not from any of the tribes of Israel. He is given a sign to go and see Peter, and he arrives after Peter has had this vision that frees him from the restrictions of who he thought this message was for. And Peter declares to him that Christ is Lord of all. He says, I truly understand that God shows no partiality, but in every nation, anyone who fears him and does what is right is acceptable to him. You know the message he sent to the people of Israel, preaching peace by Jesus Christ. He is Lord of all. At first reading, we might see just Peter and Cornelius in this text. But there is a third character. God. God is preparing both Peter and Cornelius for this interaction to take place. In this story, the preparation is fairly obvious through visions. But the lesson for us is also pretty clear. We are to prepare ourselves to share the good news, and we are to share it with those who are prepared to hear it. I only dropped one class in undergrad, and it was a calculus class that I took at the University of Boğaziçi in Istanbul, Turkey. The university was made up of the top, they do their schooling different, so it was made up of the top 1% of students from Turkey and the surrounding countries' high schools. And I went to every class, and many of the study groups I prepared. Many of the study groups, and all through the classes, the professor kept saying, like, But you know this. This is easy. You tested harder than this. And he was referring to their college tests that every high school senior takes to determine if you make it into a state school. I didn't think this stuff was easy. And yet he kept saying, this is easy. You know this. You've already done harder than this. It's not easy. I didn't know it. And so I studied. Then came the first test. It was things we never covered in class. It was way more difficult because it tested their calculus at where it was from the college exam, not based on the first few chapters of the book. I was not prepared. I couldn't finish a single question. I think the only points I got were for showing up and writing my name on the exam. It was terrible. It was humiliating too because as a foreign exchange student, my student ID number started with like 7 zeros and then some numbers where everybody else had a whole bunch of random numbers. And they would post the grades by these ID numbers. And so when I went to find out what my grade was before I dropped the class, and there were everyone took this class, so there were hundreds and hundreds of kids in the class. I'm going down the list. I was the only foreign exchange student. The only people that scored lower than me were the ones that didn't show up. I was not prepared. If a person isn't prepared to receive the good news, then the exchange is useless. Jesus tells his followers when he sends them out that if they aren't welcome, they should wipe the dust from their feet and move on. It's kind of harsh, but the point stands. So how are people prepared, and how do we become prepared to share? Should we wait, like in this text with Cornelius and Peter, where we have these fantastical visions? Has anyone here had a vision that was like that was so clear and you just knew the next morning, this is what I'm going to do? They're very few and far between, right? I don't think so. I believe it starts with relationships. Think about how connected you become with someone the longer you're in a relationship with them. Many spouses can tell what the other's thinking or feeling without the use of words. Right? The better the relationship, the better the communication. If we share this great news of God alive in our lives with those people that we're in relationship with, the better prepared we are and they are for a discussion on the depth, the breadth of God. When we gather together, we are meant to worship God, and part of that worship is preparing one another to minister. And we practice by sharing how God is active in our lives with the brothers and the sisters who are here so that we can carry this gospel into the world. But we also need to be aware that when we share the gospel, it requires a give and take. It requires a relationship. Because following Christ is not always easy. We need to have people to grieve with us and lift us up when life is rough and celebrate us when victories occur. Now, this expands our understanding of worship because the point of worship isn't just to sit here and sing and recite. The point of worship is to become prepared. And it's a chance for us to grow with one another, and it's all the opportunities we have to enter into relationships with others. So worship becomes the conversations with our guests at fish dinners. It becomes packing bags with friends during food for home. It becomes building relationships at the school pancake breakfast. It becomes growing with our neighbors and taking a moment to listen to the cashier's woes at the store. Worship becomes a part of our life as we live out Peter's words, recognizing that Christ is for all. And so we must love and serve with all. This is a chance for us to become prepared, to go out and enter into relationships with everyone, to serve with everyone, to love everyone. Because as Peter said, Christ is Lord of. We'll try that again. Christ is Lord of all. Amen.